Hello, everyone. Welcome to Studio to the Streets 2020, a series of virtual studio visits, panel discussions, tours of organizations that provide services to artists and other makers, and presentations on topics of interest to those who are or who would like to be a part of the public art world. Today, we're coming to you virtually from the studios of Land Studio, and we're excited this year. We're in our 10th year of existence. Since the merger of our predecessor organizations, Cleveland Public Art and Parkworks. And today I'll be presenting with my colleague, Erin Guido. Both of us are project managers here at Land Studio. And our job here at Land Studio is to provide public art to Greater Cleveland and to do our part in improving and making more accessible the public realm in our this beautiful region that we call home. Studio to the Streets is made possible by the citizens of Cuyahoga County through the generous support of Cuyahoga Arts and Culture. Since 2009, CAC has provided more than $4 million to Greater Cleveland artists directly through its support for artist programs. The CAC is supporting Studio to the Streets this year to provide professional development opportunities for the continued growth and success of our local community of artists. Our topic today is we're saying let your artwork speak for itself, which in our mind indicates the importance of images of your artwork and trying to get other people to commission you to do more artwork or to give you jobs in the public art world. We're going to look at it from the perspective of applying to or responding to a call for artists, which is not the only way to get work in the public art world, but it is a major way. So we're going to be talking about the materials that you need to assemble and how you want to think about presenting those materials in a way that is concise, to the point, clear, and will give people the information that they need. One point, since it just came into my head, a point that we want to make a few times today is that when on public art selection committees or juries, usually most of the people are not people who work every day in the art world. So they're not looking for like esoteric art word scrambles. They're looking for real things that are just clear, like information, whether it's written or presented in image form. Erin and I our perspective is public art administrators. We're not the ones who make choices, who decides who gets the commission, who gets the job, but we're the ones who usually take in the information, the submissions from the artists to a call for artists. We assemble the information so that the people who will be making the decisions can clearly have the information that they need to make their decisions. Additionally, Erin has a public art practice of her own, and so she will also be able to provide us with some insight from that view. During the discussion today, we would like you to, comment or put questions into the chat box. We will have a Q&A period after Erin and I talk, where you can still, if you feel more comfortable putting your questions in the chat box, you can do that, or you can raise your hand and we can have a conversation. The group today is manageable enough in size that we think we can do that.
Vince, I just wanted to, is it okay? I just wanted to say, just emphasize that we're going to give a presentation here, like some slides up to go over what Vince just said. And maybe for some of you, this might be like super obvious. You've applied to call for artists already, and this is just very simple. But for some of you, maybe it's new information and it's really helpful. But we just wanted to say that you can interject with questions, also comments if you have any additional input. And then also at the end, hopefully it'll just be a conversation. And also just knowing that some people might get public art projects other than through a call for artists, but I think some this information is still applicable if you're submitting a proposal or something like that. So just wanted to add that. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Erin. And so, as I said, we're going to talk today about from the perspective of applying or responding to a call for artists, which is a advertisement of public art project that as an artist you may be interested in. There's different forms that a call for artists can take. The standard in the industry today is a request for qualifications, which asks you to submit, examples of why you're qualified to get the commission. And it's preferred because it doesn't ask artists to do any work up front in terms of designing a concept or coming up with an idea. Request for proposals still exists as a form of call for artists. It's somewhat frowned upon because it does, an RFP does ask artists to come up with at least a conceptual proposal before there's any hope of them getting paid or getting the commission. So there are some situations where a request for proposals is appropriate, but today we're going to be looking at it from the RFQ perspective. This slide is just an excerpt from an actual RFQ that was sent out by the City of Cleveland's Public Art Program a while back. And just the submission requirements are what we want to call attention to, because even though they're clearly set out, our experience is that people don't always clearly respond to the submission requirements, and we just want to go through like the different parts. One thing we'll emphasize is that the images you submit are the most important things, because the committee, especially if it's a call that maybe 100 artists responded to, there's going to be images from all 100 artists. And so the committee is not going to have time to look in great detail and look at an image and try to figure out, what exactly are they trying to tell us with this image? You want to be clear. Images are most important. Also, you'll see in the submission requirements here that artists are required to submit a one-page underlined bold narrative, or letter of interest, which describes their qualifications and explains why they would be interested in this project and why they should be chosen. And we just want to, we'll talk a little bit more in detail about how to put that letter together, because you should have it on hand as a template. You usually are going to have to apply to multiple calls before you actually get a commission. So you want to have a template on hand that you can adjust for specific situations. We'll talk a little bit about the CV or resume, and Erin will also talk a little bit about the annotated slide list that needs to go accompany your submissions. So the next thing then, so as I said, your images are your most important thing. And so I'm going to turn it over to Erin now, and she's going to talk about images and what you should be thinking about when you assemble the images that you're going to use to apply for public art projects. Erin?
Thanks, Vince. So just want to emphasize the importance of imagery in submissions. Whether you're applying for a call for artists or, a curator asks for materials, all those kinds of things. When you're submitting to a call for artists, you could include images of your previous work, maybe some details of that previous work if there's detail work or the project you completed is more complicated. You can also include works of others which you have participated, but it's really important to include what your role was in that project. We've had cases where people have submitted, we'll have a call for artists, and multiple artists will submit the same project without naming each other or naming their role. So usually those images kind of get just thrown out because you don't know who the actual designer or author of that work is. Just being really clear, I think it's appropriate to submit something that you fabricated, but maybe didn't design, but you just want to make sure you're clear on that. You can also include maybe some concepts and ideas. Maybe you could include some images of a past proposal. This is especially could be helpful if you've never, say you're applying for a project and you don't have experience with that type of project, but you have a lot of ideas. But from your past work, you don't maybe have something that a committee would make the connection. You could create some, simple imagery that kind of shows what ideas you've been thinking of to make that connection for the committee. And you can also show your process, especially if it's, applicable for the project you're submitting to. I've included some examples of my artwork that I've made with my collaborative So Fun Studio which is a collaborative between myself and John Paul Costello. But I'm including them not because they're the best images, but because I also had bad imagery to show. So it's not like we have the best images ever, but I just also have really bad images. So wanted to show this example, submitting a piece. I mean, you can see that there's an artwork up here. It's colorful. Maybe it's movable. But, comparing that with maybe this image, if you're only showing one image of a piece, it's really important that image shows a lot of information. So this image is much more clear. Maybe the hand kind of suggests that the arrow moves up and down. It also shows a sense of scale. You can read the text on it. So, it just comparing, like, it's really important to think about the images you have. And when you're creating work, take a lot of images so you have a lot of choices of what to submit. Another example is this work, I would say, is not a very strong image. Sure, you can see what it is, but it's just not a very pretty picture. It's not in focus really compared to maybe this, where you can see, it's colorful. Maybe you see the same information, that those letters are movable, but you can also kind of imagine maybe as a committee member that this is a work that can be outside. It could be at a festival. It's mobile, things like that. So, if you're choosing between two images, it's really important that you have as much information in one image as possible.
And context is also important too. Erin, if you could go back to that image just for a second. The context in this one, you see that it's on 25th Street and in a festival situation. So the context really helps with the image. But the previous image before this, there's context. It's in it's in the Stokes wing of the main library, but the imagery around the artwork itself, you don't know what, is that part of the artwork, the artwork kind of gets lost in the surroundings in this image.
Also, I think we've gotten submissions where people, if there's a requirement of submitting 10 images for your work for a call for artists, a lot of times artists will submit this as one image. And I just want to highlight, for one thing, if you have a strict administrator or committee, this might be thrown out and not even looked at. And so when you're trying to add in more information, it could be backfiring on you. And also, this kind of slide might be good in other circumstances, but in this circumstance, it's really, you don't know where to look. It's unclear. You don't want to try to cheat the system, because you could just that can backfire. And then another example, I think it's sometimes really helpful to show context, but you want to make sure what you want people to be focusing on is really clear. So if you're showing the exhibition, maybe this image is good. If you're trying to show that one particular piece, like the previous piece, maybe this image isn't very helpful because there's not a focus on it. And then, I do think it is helpful if you have a piece, and this is especially the case if, you don't have that much public art experience, showing details or the backside or close up of how something might move is helpful, but just use that as your second image. And then I thought this was a really great example. This was a submission for a public art project by another artist. She gave me permission to use it, but so she submitted some of her materials, her, watercolors, inks on paper. She didn't have any precedent, murals to submit for this call for artists for her murals. So she made these really simple renderings that you can really, as a committee member, really imagine, like, oh, this is how this artist would approach a mural, given, this isn't the site, the exact site where that the call for artists was, because it was a request for qualifications, not a request for proposals. But you can see, she kind of gave an idea of like how she might approach a art project like the call was asking for. And I think that was really helpful as a committee member to really understand how she would approach something. And so, if you have some basic skills in Photoshop, or maybe just gaining those skills would be really helpful in selling your ideas, especially, if you are creating proposals or you're doing a call for artists in this case. And then just to add that image descriptions are really important, especially as I mentioned, that statement of your role in producing the contents of the image. You want to make sure that's really clear. Was there a collaborator? This is an example of a mural that was a collaboration with another artist, Joe Lanzolata, who actually also works at Land Studio. But, you know, being really clear that this was a collaboration, because if we both submitted this image and didn't name each other, it would be really confusing as to who did this. Did you paint it? Did you design it? You know, what was your role? That's really important. And we get, maybe some of this stuff is super obvious, but the things that we get really aren't very clear. And so we just want to emphasize what's really, really helpful and makes your work stand out. So Vince is going to cover a couple other elements really quickly, and then we can open up to more questions. But again, feel free to ask questions now or add comments in the chat.
Thanks, Erin. So getting back to it, without straying from our message that your images are the most important things to present to other people, a letter of interest, cover letter, or sometimes called a narrative statement, is also very important. And since, as I mentioned before, you'll probably be submitting to multiple calls, or you'll have multiple reasons to use a cover letter. It's good to have a template on hand that you can adjust as needed for certain things. I'll talk a little bit, just about the content of a cover letter. Of course, I put name, and you think, okay, that's pretty obvious, but it's not as obvious as you think, because often I've gotten cover letters without any name or contact information on them. And, just from the material submitted, I have to figure out what that's associated with. And then, maybe write the name and magic marker on it, so I'll remember for the future. But you should identify yourself on your letter of interest. Contact information is really, really important. If an administrator has to call you because they have a question about something you submitted or something's missing from your submission, then it's important to know how to contact you without looking through everything to try to figure out how to send you a message through your website or something like that. Almost every call for artists will ask you to limit your letter of interest to one page. And I think that's a rule of thumb that I would even call it a rule, forget the thumb. And just, so that, because often if there's many submissions to a call, people are not going to have time to read through 100, multi-page letters. So this is where you have a chance to, in words, say what you want to say. Some of these elements I borrowed from the San Francisco Arts Commission. Your letter should include an opening expression of interest in the specific call that you're responding to, and you should be specific, not just saying, oh, I think this is great, it looks like a wonderful community. You should actually say something about the call or the place where it is. Your summary of your interests as an artist, description of your practice limited to a few sentences, relevant career highlights, keep it to a few examples. Summary of past or current experiences relevant to the particular call you're applying to, and especially important is connections to the place where the artwork will be placed. Just in terms of how a letter should look, you don't want this. And this may seem like an exaggeration, but it's really not. Sometimes we get letters of interest that look like this. This could be really well organized. It could have a lot of relevant information, and it might even be an interesting read, but it doesn't look like that. It looks like babble. And so I recommend something more like this, where the artist's name is clearly on the top, so you know who this letter is from. They indicate what the project is that they're applying to, because sometimes an administrator might be assembling work on various projects. Then the letter of interest, with paragraphs and things that just make it seem accessible. And then again, the contact information is essential, and there should be multiple ways to contact you if you're comfortable with that. Just if the administrator wants to call you or send you a message, it's important to have it not only here. It should be elsewhere in your submission as well, but very much important on your letter. In terms of writing. Were you going to say something, Erin?
I just wanted to, I know you mentioned it at the beginning, but just want to emphasize the idea that normally when we're putting together, at least in Land Studio's experience, when we're putting together a committee who's going to review these, For one thing, they're mainly looking at the pictures. If they read the letter, it's probably because you're in the top, 10 artists or whatever like that. But also, it's a mixed group. So there's some artists, there's maybe a gallery expert, but it's probably mostly community members. And so just making sure you're really being clear. And that's why the shortness is important. You don't need to babble on and be, maybe if you're applying to a gallery or a show or something, that's more important to speak in a certain way. But in this case, clarity is like the most important. I just wanted to.
I would certainly second that. In terms of writing, if you go to an art show in a gallery or something, the artist statements are often works of art in themselves, just in terms of creative use of language and everything. Some of them are really clear and, give you a clear connection to the artist's thinking, and others are not, although they might be interesting or, might be poetic, things like that. Also, if you, some people are good writers and some people consider themselves not to be good writers. So, when you're putting together a letter or any written materials about your artwork, you may want to work with someone who does consider themselves to be a good writer or an editor. But really, a trick that I think you can use, and because everybody is a good writer in the sense that if you can talk about your work clearly, you can also write about it. So, if you write out a statement, you should just read it aloud to yourself. And if it sounds ridiculous, then you have to start again. But if it sounds like clear, like if you say, oh, that sounds good, that's what I would say about my artwork, then the writing is good. And you always want to have an editor look at it, and not a professional editor, just someone who can look at it and notice some maybe typos or grammatical errors that you didn't notice yourself. So, because you want this to be, you want this to really represent yourself, and you want people to you want people to be able to use it and get a clear picture of you from this. Just in terms of some other materials,
Vin, sorry to interject again, but Natalie mentioned in the chat, I have put so much work over the years into my written application items, and recently served on a review board in which no written materials were reviewed, even though they were required. This is such a discouraging revelation. I guess my question to everyone here is this common as an artist? How do you parse out your time and energy preparing these submissions between images and written materials? I guess that for in our experience, as administrators, we're like getting all this material. I wouldn't say that we would not have the letters and written material available to the reviewers. In our case, I don't think, but we definitely would have them. But you're trying to get through usually so many people that how we set up a review is usually looking at the images first with the committee, narrowing it down to a certain few, and then having actual conversations about each artist. And that's when the materials would be reviewed. But I think you're right. Sometimes, depending on the committee member, usually we send out the materials ahead of time, but committee members are busy. They're volunteering their time. Maybe 3 out of the 7 people have actually read everything ahead of time. And so they're going to be looking for the short notes from the administrator of like, what did you read? Tell me about this artist. And that's why it's really important that you're having like very clear information that's easy to digest pretty quickly. And in terms of, as an artist, how do you parse out your time and energy in preparing these submissions? I think that's why maybe it's helpful I remember when we did Studio to the Street, and we had an artist, Lake, talk about his artistic practice. And I think at this point, he's really more invited for projects. But before he submitted, he said, I think to over 50 calls for artists. But he, had these kind of templates done and then would put in the relevant information, especially in that cover letter or narrative. I think you really need to put some relevant information, but the rest of the stuff should be kind of offhand that you're just kind of changing around to make it fit the call for artists. And if you have really great images too, you want to keep those, organized. But I think it's like kind of getting it down to a science where you have templates and they're ready to go. So you don't have to completely do something new every time. I don't know, maybe Vince has something to add.
Yeah, and just, in keeping with what Erin said, often, for example, if we are presenting to us, the initial round presentation to our selection committee, I usually do a timed presentation so that each artist's images, depending on how many responses we get, we don't have time to really look at each image in detail. So in the first run through, the images are usually up for 4 seconds in my presentations. And so the committee is watching, and we don't allow questions or anything during that time. But so the images really, really have to be able to speak, for your artwork. And because they're not going to be up for too long, they need to be able to catch people's attention. And usually during the 40 seconds that someone's images are being presented, I will do the highlights from their letter of interest. And so just, things that pop out and really seem relevant, I will say to the group. I don't want to barrage the group with, reading every letter from top to bottom while they're trying to look at the images, because I think that's distracting. But generally the letter, I think the letter is important. It's not as important as the images, but I do think it's important. And it is usually made available to the committee members, and some committee members read all the letters and some don't, but we do extract information from them. Something that we don't, most people don't look at, I think, is we ask for a curriculum vitae, a CV, or a resume. And that it's important information too, because if somebody wants more information about your entire career, that's where they would look for it. And often artists do submit a full CV, multi-page CV, formatted in Chicago Manual of Style, which is great. You should have that on hand, especially if you're a career artist. And these are some of the elements that you would find in there. I put in bold certain things like that you would put in a resume, because a resume to me, and I think most people would agree, resume is a shorter version of a CV, a more concise version, which is still useful if someone wants more information about the kinds of work you've done or things like that. But again, in a certain situation, responding to a call for artists, I would say that the majority of committee members are not going to look at your resume in detail if they look at it at all, just to be honest. Another thing I want to say about that, I also mentioned having a short bio, which I think is really important also. And I like the idea of a bio that's limited to 2 or 3 sentences that really capture what's important about you as an artist and your skills and interests, which I know is hard to do in 3 sentences, but if you can do it, it's great. You can have a long bio, like a 5-paragraph bio if you want to, and I'm not saying that's inappropriate. It's just that in some situations that everything on the bottom is going to be cut out, and just the top is, that's all we have time for, and we don't have time to look through to pick out 3 sentences. So those should always be at the top if you want to have a long bio. Having a short bio that you can just hand out is a great thing to do. There was one other thing I wanted to mention. We've already talked, I think, about the importance of remembering that everybody on the committee is not a professional in the art world, so that that you're not talking to people that know the jargon or the lingo necessarily. We just briefly mentioned budgeting. This is actually a topic for probably another discussion, and usually when you're responding to a call, you don't need to provide a budget because you're not submitting a proposal. So you wouldn't be able to do a budget, but you should have budgeting in mind. If it's a small budget project, if it's a large budget project, that can govern whether you decide whether you want to join or not, based on your where you are in your career or what kind of projects that you like to work on. There's things just in this list, which in this presentation will be available to you afterwards if you're interested, are things that you should think about. And sometimes, experienced public artists obviously will already know these things, but if you're new to the field, there's multiple things: design, materials, engineering, fabrication, ancillary services like, do you need a crane to deliver the work to the site, cost of permits, having a contingency, things like that. So that's just
just to add to that, Vince. I know this is, going into details about budgeting probably could be a whole presentation in itself, but a lot of artists always ask, like, how much should I pay myself? And it really depends on the project. But we usually use a rule of thumb that an artist should be a take-home fee of at least 15 to 20% of the budget, of the overall budget. So $100,000 budget, you should be taking home about $20,000, maybe a couple thousand less or something like that. So just if you're like wondering about appropriateness of putting that in, that's pretty appropriate. And if you're doing a lot of the labor or fabrication yourself, maybe you're getting paid more too. So just wanted to note that.
Yeah, because I think you're saying, adding it to that, it's important for artists and administrators to continually make the case that artists should be paid for their work, and especially I think maybe someone new to the public art field thinks, oh, I'm not going to bother paying myself. I just want to throw myself into this and do the best project possible. But you since you need to pay your bills and everything, and you want people to know that artists should be paid, then you have to keep that in mind.
And that, I guess that's kind of not to go back to the beginning of the presentation, but I think that's why we almost always advocate for in most cases requests for qualifications rather than requests for proposals, because I think a lot of times it's really unfair when an agency is requiring artists to do a lot of work up front without paying them. If you have, sometimes what we do is do a request for qualifications and then pay 3 artists for a proposal. And then from those proposals, we'll select an artist. But I just so it really is best practice to get paid for your work. Sometimes if you're just starting out, maybe you're willing to do more proposals, but I would suggest trying more for the qualifications if you can. Also just wanted to highlight that having an online presence in our experience is really, really important. A lot of times, we're talking about a lot of more traditional calls for artists in the materials that we just went through, but sometimes, even more recent calls for artists for Land Studio are just requiring your website and or your social media. And, social media can be a great free website. If you don't have the funds right now for a website, you can use social media. I just, if you're sending that as your website, make sure that your social media is geared towards your art. Sometimes we've had submissions of their, someone's Instagram, and you kind of have to search through to find what the artwork is, what's their personal life. It's okay to have a couple of personal pictures, but just want to make sure, if you're using that to be, at least have really good images of your artwork in there too. I also think, if you're not, as Natalie mentioned, Natalie, I know you've gotten a ton of, lots of projects around, but maybe have had trouble with the calls for artists. Maybe I'm guessing that a lot of people probably found you through your website or social media presence, or other people posting your projects and then other people seeing that. So it's a way that, as me at Land Studio, I'm constantly searching Instagram, blogs, things like that, to find new artists that would be good fits for projects. And so if you have an online presence and you're posting stuff, maybe, you'll get seen, someone will see something won't happen immediately, but then a year from now, I'll be like, oh, we're putting together some portfolios. I know a couple artists that this would be a perfect project for. You may have even been already presented in some projects that, sometimes we put together portfolios for a committee to review, and maybe you just weren't selected out of those 10 artists, so you don't even know you were part of that, but you might be your online presence has put you in the running for those. So just wanted to highlight that. I know that these are 2 local artists from Cleveland, Scott Goss, who's an awesome public artist, but I love how he sometimes will post his, sometimes if he applies for a call for artists or is selected to develop a proposal, he'll post his actual not selected projects, which for me as an art administrator is really helpful, because I can see, like what he's imagining, what he might do in other spaces. And so if you don't have, if you're having bad luck with your calls for artists, or maybe you've gotten selected but weren't selected for the final project, I do think it's actually a good idea if you're proud of what you presented to present that into the world, because you never know who's going to see that and who's going to maybe think of you for a project that would be a good fit.
And just what, Natalie entered another comment about saying that some administrators, I think, have said that Instagram is the main way that they look for artistic talent nowadays. And I would say that that's our experience too, which Erin can address more clearly than I can. If we're doing a project that, sometimes projects require a call for artists, for various reasons, just to make sure that, anyone who's interested can apply. But, when there's certain public art programs that we have control of, that we're not doing with, say, the city of Cleveland or some other government entity. And in those, Erin is great at looking for artists on the internet. And I would say that Instagram probably today, this might not be true next year or 5 years from now, is really like the key place to look for artists.
Totally. And I think that's why, I would also advocate, if you are posting your art on social media, and I'm honestly not the best example of this because my images aren't always the greatest on Instagram, but I would say, like, being a little more serious about what you're posting to social media to really show your artwork in a great light. Because, like, you don't know who's screenshotting that and putting you into a presentation to present to people. So any images I'm finding online, it's stuff that, to try to advocate for an artist, that's the only stuff I have to work with sometimes. Obviously we love to do like studio visits and things like that, but sometimes when you're trying to make a connection for a public art project that maybe an artist doesn't have experience with or anything, all you have to go on is what is on their online presence. And then just wanted to, obviously social media is important, but having a really clear, beautiful website is important as well. We always prefer websites that, have great imagery that we can show off to any selection committee, and just making sure you have very, a very not confusing website. So this one, Mark Riegelman, an artist from Cleveland who lives in New York now, has a lot of public art projects all over, but, very clear home projects. He can be a consultant, press info, and contact. And just, sometimes it seems obvious, but some websites are just so hard to navigate and find what you're looking for. So that's just, and also just there's so many templates. You don't have to be a graphic designer. You can go crazy if you are a graphic designer and make your website really show your personality, but you don't have to. There's so many templates right now, and they're pretty cost effective if you're really wanting to make art your career, and your website can look really beautiful. And I think that's all the stuff we have, in presentation format. We're gonna open up maybe for more conversation and questions. If you guys wouldn't mind, you could turn on your camera so we could all talk. I'll take down the presentation. We'll just want to highlight that, this is more about getting selected for that public art project, but tomorrow we're also hosting during lunch an artists and fabricators panel discussion. So that's going to be in a different format, but with a moderator, Lauren, a local artist, as well as some fabricators and a national public artist, Martha Jackson Jarvis. I know, Natalie, you work a lot with graphic design and build, so that's cool, all the connections. But anyways, just wanted to highlight that that's happening. If you want to talk more about like fabrication, how do you get that 3D public art built? But I will stop sharing my screen and put my video into gallery and open up for more questions and comments. Or also, it would be helpful to know also, like, was this information that we presented too basic? Is it, is it helpful? Like, any feedback, because with the Studio to Street series, we're planning on continuing some of these panel discussions and studio visits, but we also want to do a couple more sessions like this that's more like here's the information we have and we just want to share it. And so knowing what else you want to know or if this is helpful would be really great too.
Well, I will say yes, it's very helpful.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for doing this.
Yeah, great.
So I'm Paula, and I just wanted to say that, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I just want to say this was really helpful to me because I have applied a few times and I've gotten some in-person proposals, but I've never received the commission from Land Studio. So I was thinking that for the next, another session that would be helpful is how to present if you're chosen to present a proposal and what people look for, because usually the search committees or the committees that are there are maybe 20 people.
Yeah.
And if you don't know how to, and you only have maybe 30 minutes to present. And so I always wondered, how do they decide in that short of time on one person? And I think it would be really helpful for us to know that process also.
Totally.
Yeah, that's good. That's good, Paula, because a next step often after the initial application you submit to a call for artists, a few artists, sometimes 3, sometimes 5, are asked to actually develop a proposal, which they should get paid for, and then the rules are slightly different in terms of because there's a smaller group, the written materials could be more important. Like people will have time to look at each artist's written materials, and your images are you don't have to be as quick and concise with them. But I think we should do that. Have a presentation on that.
Yeah, we had in our previous iteration of Studio Street when we were able to be in person, we actually had, and Elaine actually participated in this, but I'm trying to see if anyone else did, but actually had like a mock proposal and a mock selection committee. So I wonder, I'm trying to think like maybe in our next session, we could do something like that virtually to kind of, because I think that was really helpful to see how people presented, and then also how then the selection committee looked at things. The presenters had thick skin, because usually you wouldn't be present during the selection when they're talking about your work. But.
Right, and also I was wondering if there is, this might get too personal, but about the thick skin, but is there a way to critique someone's presentation? To say, wow, if you would have, it could be completely just the idea that they like and that's why they select, but it might be the way the person presents or what they present and what they don't. Totally. That is and if that could be critiqued, actually critiqued after an actual proposal.
Yeah.
Is there an option for having that done?
I think for land, we're always open. Normally, some projects we're actually selecting the artists, but normally we're more helping the selection committee have all the information they need to make a good choice. And so if we're running the call, I would say, at least from our perspective, we're always open to, like, if the artist sends it to us ahead of time, even helping out. Like, we want each artist to be, give the best presentation they possibly can, because that will just make whatever gets selected the best project. So we're always open to critiquing before and after. At least from our perspective, you can always use us in that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because even it might be good. I can't think of a time when we've done this, but I've thought about it. If an artist wants to even do a run through before the actual presentation, we could help with that. We've never done that, but I think it would be a good idea to make that available.
Yeah. Also to add, I do think sometimes you're right. Sometimes maybe a committee selects just the best idea, but I do think the presentation is so important. Mark Riegelman, who we had up his website, and he's an artist. Actually, we're doing a studio visit with him and Lake, the other artist that I talked about, on the 7th of December. So that might be a good one to come to also. But I do feel like he's like the gold star in presentations. I feel like before you even see the concept, the lead up, you're already sold because it's so strong. He's making so many connections to the site. And, you know, once he presents it, you're like, you feel as if it's the most perfect thing because of how he presented it, the lead up.
You know, I've seen him present, and I agree with you. I think you're right. But he's so animated that his personality takes over. And most artists aren't that outgoing. They're more introverted. Mm-hmm. So that's sort of a setback too. Yeah.
Not everyone needs to be insane like Mark Riegelman, but I do think like his presentation style is pretty strong. But you need to see what works for you. I think you're right for sure.
Yeah, that I was thinking that, you know, too, like just as we were preparing for this today, how you know, you do need to learn to make your own kind of music, because even, you know, we have advice that we're giving today, which I think is good advice, but again, just like you pointed out, Paula, you know, not everybody has like an exuberant presentation skill or something like that. So, you know, I think you do have to find out what works for yourself. And, you know, and because another thing I was going to say today is that, you know, when you're submitting to a call for artists, you shouldn't send things that were not asked for. Like sometimes people will send us a giant coffee table book of their art or something, and you know, which might be beautiful, but like it has no use in the process of commissioning that particular public artwork. But when you're presenting an actual proposal at the next stage, which is what you're talking about, Paula, then you can bring in props, you know, props that we don't want you to send in at the beginning. I remember artist Melissa Daubert, who many of you probably know. She did a public artwork through the city's public art program on Pearl Road in Old Brooklyn. And when she was presenting her proposal, she actually had a maquette, you know, a small mock-up of the proposal, and that was, you know, that was really helpful. And so at the, you know, the next stage, props and things like that, you know, can be useful. Whereas, you know, we don't want you to send us a model in the mail that we have to figure out what we're going to do with afterwards at the initial stage. But if you bring that into, you know, to show the committee when you're actually a finalist, then it's different. You know, and you know, if you're not strong at like doing an exuberant presentation, you can be strong in other ways. So you know, just not having Mark Riegelman's personality shouldn't be a setback. So.
I'll just say, I think that you laid out a lot of really good information very concisely and very clearly. So thank you for doing that. I think whether you're new to this process or have been through it numerous times, it's always really helpful just to kind of get some reinforcement on like, you know, how the process works. And having been on the artist end of it and the reviewer end of it, I don't think it works the same every time, obviously, but I think a really important reminder that Vince brought up a few times is that most people on the selection committees are not arts, you know, workers or professionally working in arts fields. And that's a very big difference between like applying for something like a grant or a residency and applying for public art. And so keeping, you know, a clear idea of who your audience is on all of those different kinds of submissions is really important and just a helpful thing to remember, because I definitely find myself, you know, referring back to cover letters that I thought were really great and written for one purpose, and then, you know, maybe they aren't the best thing for this particular project. So, so thanks again for sharing your experience and, you know, kind of pulling back the curtain for us a little bit on how you go about, you know, handling all of these submissions. Thank you.
Thanks, Natalie.
Yeah,
I do.
That's a good point. Oh, go ahead, Erin.
No, I was just going to say, like, I think you're right. Like being part of so many selection committees, sometimes it's like drives you crazy, like how random it almost feels, you know, like, especially, you know, you never know what personalities and what people are going to be drawn to. So it's not being random is not to frustrate you, but it's to say like, keep on applying, because you may have been like very strong up there, but you just weren't the top. You might've been the top, you know, they're looking through 3 artists and you might've been 10 times the 4th artist. And for whatever reason, it's not working, but people are really discussing your work. So just want to encourage you to like, keep on applying, even though if you're not getting a couple, it doesn't mean that your work isn't being looked at. I mean, maybe there's some tips you need to kind of change to make it stronger, but it also could be just that, this particular committee didn't connect to your work. But if there was a couple different people on this committee, maybe next time they'll connect to your work. So just keep on applying and keep on putting your work out there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what you really have to do.
And if you're interested, as part of Studio to the Street, Vince and Erin have also been offering their services as reviewing portfolios. So either one-on-one or in small groups. And I'll put my email in the chat. I'm happy to help coordinate those. But if you want some other eyes to look at the things you are presenting in calls or on your online present and just want some feedback on that, I can hook you up with Erin and Vince to help with that.
And it's just good to like we met with Mary Thomas, and it was just, and others, it's just so good to meet people, because maybe we haven't found the perfect project for them like in that moment, but a year from now, you're like, we know, I mean, Vince and I are just constantly trying to get to know and understand more artists, more local artists' work. And especially if you're interested in public art, knowing that then like we just want more public artists, more local artists to get more projects here in Cleveland or elsewhere. I mean, we're like Land Studios, like just to basically to help people get cool projects and make them really successful. So we want to meet as many artists as possible. We want to understand what you're interested in, what you've been working on now, what you want to do. It's really good to know, because then, when we find a good fit, we can put you in front of a committee, and maybe we already have done that. And you just didn't, that certain committee didn't select you, but doesn't mean we're going to not keep on putting you in front of people. So.
Yeah. Because that's, just in terms of the variation, we, for example, we've managed the City of Cleveland's public art program for many years, or at least provided administrative services to it. And, if I'm the person who's leading a committee discussion, I'm consensus oriented in the sense of the discussion that ensues after the presentations by the artists, I find usually does lead to consensus, even though there are some people who, their preferred one is not the one that rises to the top. They still can come to agreement that yes, this is a good one, and we can all support it. And to me, that's ideal. And so, I always provide what I call rating devices to the committee, and they will. I usually I don't put numbers on it or anything. It's just like I have like a plus minus question mark column where they can things they like about a particular image, or things they don't like, or questions they have about it. They can just do all that, and so that leads to a discussion. It's not, but we're not trying to like come up with a rating. But sometimes, especially sometimes in a city program or something where just the way the city puts out contracts for anything, not just art, has to be very metric. Like there has to be numbers that show that this person is the chosen one because their numbers are the best. And it's really hard. I think it's really hard to do that with public with art, but it does happen sometimes. And so we you have to work within different constraints and in different situations.
Yeah, but we try to stay away from like the numbers, because I think that's like Vince said, I think that's a harder way to judge person on like this person was 1 point higher than this person or something, more than like conversation and what, talking with the committee of what really fits for the space. And
so I think that's about all the time we have for today. Megan, it looks like you want to say something. No? Okay, because you just came forward into the screen. But you're muted though also.
Sorry. Thank you all for being here. I am going to be sending you a survey to fill out. Your feedback is really important for us to continue to get funding to do things like this and to be providing the most helpful information to you. So if once you get that link to the survey, if you can fill it out, it's very, very helpful for us.
And Megan, maybe you could add, we could send out the PDF of this presentation if that would be helpful for everyone, maybe along with that link or another email. We can send out that. So just in case you want any of the information, it's there for you.
And then these sessions are also recorded and are up on our website probably in the next few days.
Would you be able to send the slides with the written information on instead of the whole video?
Totally. Yeah, I think, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, yeah, Paula, that'll go out with the survey. So you should get a copy of this in PDF.
Good, thanks.
All right. Well, thanks everyone.
Yeah, thanks for your comments.
We hope to see you tomorrow if you're able to join us for the fabricators panel tomorrow, which will be moderated by one of our favorite local artists, Lauren Herzeg-Bauman. So if you can join us tomorrow, we hope to see all of your faces again then.
Thanks, everyone.
Hey, thank you guys.
Bye, everyone.